Now, 2025 has been one hell of a year for video games, and a pretty surprising one at that, both for better and for worse. Many amazing games arrived totally out of nowhere and monopolized our time, while a number of titles that we expected to hit sadly fell a bit short of the mark. It just goes to show that you can't truly tell how a game will turn out until you're playing it for yourself. There's always going to be some disappointments for sure, but there's always going to be the potential for a game to soar far beyond any reasonable expectations. So let's chat about them today. As I'm Jules, this is FGS, and these are the top 10 2025 games that surprised everyone. Number 10, Donkey Kong Bonanza. Now, even accepting that Donkey Kong Bonanza was developed by Nintendo, EPD, the same team responsible for the majestic Super Mario Odyssey, many expected the first Donkey Kong game in over a decade to simply be reliably good and maybe okay. And even the most die-hard Nintendo fans weren't expecting Bonanza to crash the Game of the Year conversation quite so decisively. But the first 3D entry into the series since 1999's Donkey Kong 64 turned out to be a stone-cold banger, receiving not only the best reviews of the series to date, but swiftly supplanting the slightly disappointing Mario Kart World as the Switch 2's killer app. Bonanza basically pulled out all of the stops with its compulsively addictive, ludicrously fun gameplay and gorgeously presented world. Few were expecting Bonanza to be this damn good, but similarly there weren't many anticipating it to take the franchise to entirely new heights. Years on from now, do not be shocked if it's still lauded as one of Nintendo's best ever platformers. Number 9, FBC Firebreak. Now, FBC Firebreak sold itself almost entirely on the fact that it was an off-the-wall first-person extraction shooter from one of the most distinctive and acclaimed studios working today, that being the Control and Alan Wake devs Remedy Entertainment. To sweeten the deal, FBC Firebreak was also hyped up as being set within the Control universe, and considering how beloved that game is, it set expectations high for Remedy's first multiplayer release. But it ultimately launched to wildly mixed reviews, with many complaining about the game's tedious, grindy opening hours, overabundance of bugs, and general gameplay loop that just wasn't compelling enough. Despite Remedy's penchant for tight mechanics and technical polish, FBC Firebreak feels like the total polar opposite, a roughshod experience that lacked the personality that players have come to expect from this studio. Within weeks of the game's release, its concurrent Steam player count fell off a cliff and never recovered, ensuring that it unexpectedly clambered into the ever-growing pile of forgotten multiplayer games in short order.
Hey guys, I just gotta have a quick word with you about today's video sponsor. It's us, FGS. Subscribe to our channel. There's no sponsorships going on here at the moment, so why not just take the time out your day to subscribe to our channel, help us out. See you later.
Number 8, Silent Hill F. Even though the Silent Hill franchise was mercifully restored to overdue prominence with last year's remake of Silent Hill 2, that had no real bearing on whether Silent Hill F would succeed or not. After all, given that Silent Hill F was an entirely new story with a polarizing new Japanese setting while touting a more combat-heavy approach, there were many reasons that it might not actually land with fans. And that's without getting into the fact that it was developed by Neobards Entertainment, an outfit which primarily works as a port and support studio. That is to say that Silent Hill 2 could have so easily been a fluke for the franchise, and indeed, there were innumerable Reddit threads in the lead-up to Silent Hill F's release expressing skepticism of its ability to deliver. But it ended up reviewing basically on par with Silent Hill 2, with many praising the bold new setting, which still retained the classic, oppressive Silent Hill atmosphere alongside some of the series' most thoughtful storytelling to date. With 2 back-to-back critical and commercial hits, it's safe to say that Silent Hill feels like it's back in good hands once again. Number 7, MindsEye. Even though there were certainly reasons to be wary of new sci-fi action game MindsEye, it was tough to ignore the enormous pedigree behind it, that being that it was developed by Leslie Benzies, the main producer of the Grand Theft Auto franchise from GTA 3 through to GTA 5. The man obviously knows a thing or two about delivering an enormous AAA open-world experience, and so it was easy enough to give him the benefit of the doubt with this seemingly ambitious new tentpole project. And even though a fair number of red flags went up during development, from the weirdly low-key marketing to numerous prominent team members quitting just before it released, and streamers even having their sponsored streams pulled last minute, it still didn't seem like MindsEye could be that bad, right? Right? Well, far from being a messy, mediocre piece of work, MindsEye was near universally panned by critics and players alike for its dull, bug-filled gameplay and nonsensical story, enough so that it swiftly became the worst reviewed game of the entire year. Many could have believed MindsEye scoring in the 50s or 60s on Metacritic, but its final score of 37 is within spitting distance of last year's most high-profile dud, the Lord of the Rings Gollum game, which scored just 33 on the site, and that says it all. Number 6, Dynasty Warriors Origins. It's not unfair to say that the Dynasty Warriors series' best days seem to be long behind it, and that pains me to say because I'm a bloody huge fan of it. I know it's the same game over and over, but I will always buy it, and I'm so glad I did when it came to Dynasty Warriors Origins. Because even though franchise fatigue appeared to be in full swing, and the fact that few had much hype for Dynasty Warriors Origins, it came out the gate swinging. It turned out to be a major breath of fresh air for the rather stagnant IP, receiving well-earned praise for its more fluid tactics-focused combat, especially scaled battles, and strong presentation and performance. Crucially, Origins also hewed away from the widely criticized dull open world of Dynasty Warriors 9, offering up a more streamlined and curated map in place. This all added up to Origins becoming the best reviewed Dynasty Warriors game, and say it with me kids, of all time! An outcome that just about nobody could have anticipated pre-release. It just goes to show that taking the time to nurture a game while actively listening to your player base can actually pay off dividends. Number 5. Killing Floor 3. Considering the critical acclaim and stupendous staying power of multiplayer shooter Killing Floor 2, there wasn't much concern that the long-awaited threequel would struggle to deliver. Well, just more Killing Floor. But Killing Floor 3 caught just about everyone off guard with the decidedly more mixed response from critics and die-hard players alike. The sequel just doesn't feel like it does anything to move the franchise forward, while pointless mechanical changes and an abundance of bugs actually make it feel like a step back much of the time. The blistering consensus across the board was that Killing Floor 2 remains the series' high point, and so it's little surprise that the threequel shed most of its player base within a matter of weeks as they made a mass exodus back to the second game. At the time of press, Killing Floor 2 has 5 times as many concurrent Steam players as Killing Floor 3, and that really says it all. Number 4. Blueprints. Blueprints came out this past April without much of a marketing campaign at all, instead being quietly released by a tiny dev team after more than 8 years of work. And while it would have been incredibly easy for Blueprints to disappear into the sea of decent indie roguelike puzzlers released every month, to call Blueprints decent was quite underselling it and all of its accomplishments. With critics tripping over themselves to praise the game's clever, innovative gameplay loop to the heavens, it became increasingly difficult to ignore. Blueprints wasn't merely just a great indie game, it swiftly pulled into pole position with a stonking 92 metascore, leaving it better reviewed than even some of the most anticipated games of the year like Split Fiction, Hollow Knight Silksong, and Death Stranding 2 On the Beach. And even though Blueprints has been out now for around 6 months or so, it's maintained a high profile in the Game of the Year conversation as we approach the end of 2025, a frankly unfathomable prospect when the game launched so unassumingly this past spring. Number 3. Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour. While there were admittedly many questioning Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour before release, the fact that Nintendo didn't include this gamified system demo as a free pack-in suggested a certain confidence on their part. By charging actual money for it, it invited expectations that the Welcome Tour would be more than a bog-standard travelogue of the Switch 2's hardware features, and ultimately be more akin to the PS5's brilliant pack-in title Astro's Playroom. But that optimism faced the unfortunate reality on Switch 2 launch day, that the Welcome Tour was ultimately a mediocre assemblage of basic minigames that lacked most of the expected Nintendo charm. There was genuine hope that Welcome Tour would justify being a paid title by delivering an addictive suite of minigames while serving as a delightful love letter to Nintendo's history. But this was instead a strangely bland, sterile, and even soulless experience that Nintendo had the bloody cheek to charge for. Number 2. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2. Even accepting that Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 had an infamously troubled and prolonged development, there was a groundswell of optimism once acclaimed indie dev The Chinese Room was announced to have replaced troubled original team Hardsuit Labs in 2023. With The Chinese Room having the acclaimed likes of Dear Esther, Amnesia: A Machine for Pigs, Everyone's Gone to the Rapture, and Still Wakes the Deep to their names, this more expansive title seemed like a bold but encouraging step up for the team. And even with the obvious potential for messiness that this invited, many fans were still optimistic that The Chinese Room would deliver an atmospheric and richly written action RPG. But Bloodlines 2 was actually panned by many prominent outlets after receiving polarizing responses from the wider gaming sphere, with many criticizing its empty open world and the overall limitations of its gameplay compared to its predecessor. Though some lauded the characters and performances, the consensus is that Bloodlines 2 is a half-baked follow-up that lacks the depth and general excitement of the first game. And that's a damn shame considering the plaudits of The Chinese Room, and one that perhaps suggests that they're better suited to sticking with more constrained narrative-first exploration titles. And number 1, Clair Obscur Expedition 33. And finally we have the game on this list which outpaced even the most overtly optimistic of expectations. In the lead up to the release of Clair Obscur Expedition 33, many were hopeful that this would be an entertaining RPG that made good on its uniquely apocalyptic premise. But given that Expedition 33 was also coming from a new, fairly small development team, Sandfall Interactive, there was obvious concerns about it over-promising and under-delivering. Yet the game released to near-universal acclaim from critics and players alike, with many dubbing it an instant masterpiece and praising basically every aspect of its conception, from the story to the direction, voice acting, art design, music, and of course the gameplay. What could have so easily been a fun but deeply flawed, janky experience from an over-ambitious developer was ultimately an extremely polished, possibly generation-defining RPG that's highly likely to scoop up many major Game of the Year honors. Many AA games with AAA aspirations simply fall far short of the mark, but Expedition 33 took the notion of punching above its weight and elevated it to genuine high art. And there we go, my friends. Those were the top 10 2025 games that surprised everyone. Hope you enjoyed that, and let me know what you thought about it down in the comment section below, as well as what games surprised you. I'd love to read your stories about that. And if you want to chat to me in the meantime, you can do so by going over to Blue Sky and Instagram, where I'm at RetroJ, but the O is a 0. Hope to see you over there, my friends, and I hope that you treat yourself well with love and respect, because you deserve the bloody best, alright? And do not let anything or anyone else tell you otherwise. You are a massive ledge. As always, I've been Jules. You have been awesome. Never forget that, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.